Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today will be another video, I guess, in my little series of talking about One Piece and all of the One Piece sagas. I have really been enjoying it up until this point. I've done a few videos already on East Blue and just like the start of One Piece with Skypiea, Alabasta. I've done one on Water 7 and CP9, that whole saga. And my most recent one was Thriller Bark. So if you haven't watched those ones, make sure to go check that out just so you can catch up on what my thoughts were of those initial sagas before you watch this one. So I left off at Sabaody with Kuma booting the Straw Hat crew members in two different directions. They basically disappear into thin air and we don't know where they are at this point. This was after they had a massive battle with Kizaru and all of Kuma's android kind of doubles. So they kind of booted off, no one knows what's happening. They were absolutely defeated by Kizaru and the android doubles. They just couldn't keep up with them. They were not strong enough, so they were just defeated. The Amazon Lily arc kind of starts with Luffy floating in the air in this massive bubble. He realizes where he is and he realizes that his other Straw Hat members must have been in the same situation, so they must also be in the air in this giant bubble. All of a sudden, he crash lands onto this island, which is kind of like when he wakes up, it's in this massive jungle. So he wakes up on this island, not knowing where the heck he is. He gets up and of course Luffy is just hungry. Like you'd expect that from Luffy. He's hungry. It's been a couple of days, I think, that they were in the air, so he's ravenous. And he goes out to explore. He's trying to find some food. He kind of lands in this mushroom field. So he takes this opportunity to just indulge in all of these different types of mushrooms. He ends up stumbling across a mushroom that when he eats one of them, it just keeps growing and growing. So like he's got mushrooms growing out of different places in his body. He's in serious danger because they're just multiplying. And then we get introduced to these women who have like a snake kind of on their back. Luffy is taken to the medicine woman in this village. At this point, it's all women. So you don't see any men around. It's just all women. Luffy's taken back to one of their medicine woman. She cures him in the end. Basically the whole village is in on this now because this is like a big hoo-ha, and they all take him to the river so that they can bathe him. At this point, these women, they've never seen a man in their life, so they think that Luffy is a woman. They have no idea that he's a man. So they take him to the river to bathe him, and the most cheekiest scene I have seen in One Piece caught me by surprise when they were bathing him. And actually, you know what? I'll let you watch the scene. I don't really want to describe it. I definitely laughed out loud with that one, and at how much that it surprised me and caught me off guard. Oda's little cheeky sense of humor is hilarious, but that was funny. We were also introduced to Nyan in this scene. She was the previous empress of Amazon Lily, basically the whole island. She comes in and then that's when she tells everyone that this is in fact a man, and they all just go hysterical because they've never seen a man before. Luffy wakes up in shock because he doesn't know where he is. He's in a jail. All of the women, of course, they're gathered around the jail cell because they're just gawking at him, trying to figure out his like ins and outs. We see one of them, I forgot her name, but she's writing notes. She's writing notes about his every movement. All of the women, they start asking him heaps of questions because they're trying to figure out everything that a man does. One of the questions in particular is about his you-know-what downstairs. Of course, that prompts all of the women to want to see it. And that was also, this whole like episode fully caught me off guard. I feel up until this point, there's cheeky moments and there's humor, but not in this way, like this type of cheeky humor. So I did enjoy just a little change up. So after the women go and get him some new clothes, Luffy puts it on. It's got all these floral embroidery on it, and he doesn't like it because he's like, I'm a man. I don't want to wear all this floral stuff. I'm a captain. So he starts freaking out, being like, get me some new clothes because I can't wear this anymore. That's when all of the women get onto the defensive because they think that he's about to attack. So Luffy ends up breaking out of his cell and getting away. He runs back into the jungle and he is hiding because he doesn't want the woman to kill him. In enters the pirate empress Boa Hancock. Now, I was super excited to meet Boa Hancock. I opened up a heap of OP07 One Piece card game cards last year. I opened up so many trying to get the Boa manga rare, but I couldn't actually pull it in the end. And I grew really fond of her because, you know, I'd seen a lot of her. I'd actually watched a few scenes and I was like, this chick is awesome. Like, she is a boss. But then when she is actually like introduced and she comes out from her ship, so the Kuja ship, she comes out of her room and there's a kitten and she kicks the kitten. And that made me so mad. Like, I got really mad. She did not make a good first impression on me whatsoever. It kind of ruined like my whole thought of how she was initially, because I thought she was like this caring, nice, lovely pirate empress, but no, it turns out she was like a bit of an asshole. And actually was like that throughout most of Amazon Lily, where she was like a bit of a condescending asshole. I think once you find out her backstory, it makes a bit more sense. But yeah, I saw that and I was like, we're not kicking kittens around here. I don't like seeing that. And it made me mad. What do you guys think? Is it just me, or did that give you a bad impression of Boa at the start? I mean, look, putting aside her looks, because obviously she's beautiful, but like, she kicked a kitten. I mean, how can you come back from that? That's awful. And later on, I think she kicked a puppy as well. Like, later on in Amazon Lily, she full on kicked a puppy. I will not tolerate animal abuse. So yeah, what did you guys think? If you remember, let me know in the comments. Anyway, so she exits the ship and she's greeted by these Marines who tell her that Ace is going to be executed in a few days, basically ordering her to attend the execution. Boa and her sisters then arrive back at the village where they then have to take a bath. This is like a full covert operation. They've got to get everyone involved and like bring up all the security walls. And that's because they've told everyone in the village that these markings on their back, if anyone were to go like look at them, if anyone were to see them, they would turn into stone. So it's this massive operation to make sure no one is able to see their backs. Everyone is super, I don't know, they get excited when these sisters take baths. So they're just like outside the Kuja castle, just looking in at all the commotion, I guess. Meanwhile, Luffy is in the jungle, lost, trying to figure out how he's going to get back to Sabaody to see all of the crew. And he comes up with this genius idea to just ask Boa. He's just like, I'll just ask her straight up. So this all then leads into Luffy, who ends up in the bath with Boa. He somehow manages to get to Kuja Castle and is in the bath with Boa. Boa's back is turned and he can see her marking full on. So she turns around and she's obviously like not happy at seeing this man in her bath. But Luffy does recognize the marking and he's like, where have I seen that before? I know that I've seen that one. And then later on we figure out that it's because Hachi had a similar kind of marking. We're then brought to this massive arena where all of the women in the village are seating because they want to see like what's going on. Boa comes down and she ends up turning the two women who helped Luffy into stone because they were defending Luffy and helping Luffy. And Luffy is like super angry because of this. Then the sisters come out and they end up fighting Luffy. Here we actually get to see how strong these sisters are because they started off absolutely dominating Luffy until the very end, basically. Like, Luffy was just getting defeated. He ends up getting one of the sisters to fall into the area between the arena and the seating, So between that, there's like this massive pit of spikes. So anyone that falls into that, they're just instantly dead. Luffy jumps onto her back and he's just like in this really weird position. The sister then realizes that Luffy is covering her marking on her back. She's just completely shocked, like, why would he be covering her marking? The sisters end up asking Luffy why he did that. And so he tells them that their fight has absolutely nothing to do with the marking on their back that they don't want anyone to see. This is honestly, it's so typical Luffy, where even though he was so angry at the start and they were in this massive battle, he still just ended up protecting this marking and not wanting, anyone to see it because the sisters don't want anyone to see it. And I really feel like this comes back to his instincts. And I've spoken about this in some of my past videos, where he's just like such an instinctual person, and he goes and is driven by his gut feeling of people. And so I think that he kind of saw that Boa and her sisters are just not evil. They don't have an evil intent. Maybe they're just a bit broken, or something's just, happening with them. And I think he kind of picked up on that, which is why he felt like he wanted to protect them. That was just my perspective of that. I feel like Luffy in the past, he'll only really beat down those ones where he feels like they're morally wrong, or they're doing morally evil things, or they're hurting his friends. But he probably felt like that wasn't their intent at the start. There's also this other hilarious part where Luffy is invited back to the Kuja Castle. He's so excited because he thinks that he's going to get food. He thinks he's going to get meat and he's going to get a massive banquet because he's starving. And then he enters Boa's room and she's just sitting there and she's half naked. She's got her back fully exposed. This is like every man in One Piece, their dream to see Boa like this and in this state. But to Luffy, he's just disappointed. He's disappointed because he didn't get the food. And honestly, yeah, that he's got his priorities straight, to be honest. Food is everything. The reason why she had her back exposed, she wasn't just like being all raunchy, is because she wanted Luffy to tell her where he's seen the marking before. That's where we find out about Boa and her sister's past and what they've been through. And we find out that she used to be a slave with her sisters and she was treated really, really poorly. The reason why she didn't want anyone to see this marking is because she didn't want anyone to recognize it and see her as someone different. And she was embarrassed. I think that like the full thing was that she was embarrassed. But Luffy didn't care. Of course he didn't care. It was like, he's just like, okay, sure. Sorry, got a bit of a visitor. Say hi. Say hi. Oh, he's purring. He wants a cuddle. Luffy is invited back to Nion's, that previous Empress's place. And this is where he finds out that Ace is going to be executed in a few days. So he kind of kicks into gear and he's like, I can't go back to Sabaody now. I have to go find Ace and rescue him. Got a few days. I need to ask the Empress if I can borrow a ship. Meanwhile, in Kuja Castle, Boa is stricken with this completely unidentified illness. All of the women are so worried. They've got no idea what's going on. Is she going to die? Because she just can't get up. And then that's when Nion enters the scene with all of her knowledge and tells everyone that Boa has love sickness because she has fallen in love with Luffy. From here on out, her whole personality is just loving Luffy. Like, she's absolutely obsessed with him. With everyone, she will do this dance where she's like got her chin up and she's like pointing down at everyone. She's looking down on everyone. She doesn't like a lot of men. She doesn't really like a lot of people. But with Luffy, that's her exception. And she just goes into like this full caring, wifely trope. It's funny watching her progress throughout One Piece like that. Boa and Luffy, because obviously Boa's just doing anything for Luffy now, they set out on the marine ship to Impel Down. Boa is like hiding Luffy in her coat, and it is a funny journey because he obviously eats a lot. Every single time she has to keep asking the Marines to send them food. The Marines are just like, oh my God, how does this woman eat so much? She's so thin. How is she stomaching all of this stuff? And she just has to put up this massive facade that she eats so much. That's kind of like the end of Luffy in the Amazon Lily arc. And after this, towards the end, we get to see where all the other Straw Hat crew members end up, which was pretty interesting to find out like where everyone else was. Nami wakes up on this island in the sky where she's greeted by this elderly man who's like trying to tell her how to tie a knot. She kind of like freaks out because she's like, where the hell am I? But it ends up that she's on Weatheria Island, where it's like this island in the sky. It's like a scientific island that they're studying the weather. Brooke hilariously rocks up on this island at like the perfect time, where the villagers are conducting some sort of ritual to summon Satan to help them fight against this neighboring village that's like continuously tormenting them. So basically all the villagers think that Brooke is Satan, and it really adds to it because he's literally made of bones. So he just literally looks like he is Satan. Frankie ends up on this winter island, so he's like covered in snow, and that's when he is stricken down by this cyborg dog that shoots these explosives at him. That's when I think it was a kid or the older man that comes up to him and tells him where he is. Chopper ends up on this relatively small island that's inhabited by these ginormous birds as well as humans, but the humans and the birds just absolutely despise each other. So they're just constantly in battles with each other whenever they come into contact. So the humans are on the ground level and the birds are all the way up on these giant cliffs in the sky, and they just keep their distance. But Chopper ends up on this island and the humans think that he's food, so they're trying to boil him up to have like a bit of a feast on him. So at this point they don't know that he can talk. Usopp ends up on this island that's like a big jungle. Yes, I realized that in my last few videos I've been saying Usopp, not Usopp. Thank you for pointing that out in the comments. Is Usopp, and I need to remember that it's Usopp and not Usopp. I don't know why my mind just immediately sees the U and it's like Usopp. Anyway, he's on this island in the jungle and he meets this Heracles. He ends up saving him from this like massive man-eating bug, and then that's how they're introduced. Robin ends up on Tequila Bridge, where she learns is where prisoners or citizens of countries that aren't with the world government end up and are forced to build this bridge. The bridge has been under construction for the past like 700 years, and they're basically subjected to like a lot of torture and a lot of harsh environments on this island. So of course Robin ends up on this bridge. She meets this younger girl and she kind of like forms a bond with this girl. So we kind of see the start of this friendship. Zoro ends up on this island, or it's like a creepy island. It's got like this haunted castle. Surprisingly, Perona is there. So that's where Perona got zapped off by Kuma in Thriller Bark, because she said that that's the place that she wanted to be the most, in like this haunted mansion. Zoro is passed out because all of his injuries are still like pretty prevalent from way back in Thriller Bark when he took on all of Luffy's injuries. And then he was trying to battle all of, everything in Sabaody. So he's pretty badly beat up. Perona ends up kind of caring for him and looking after him, bandaging him up, getting him back to health. However, Sanji ends up in the funniest predicament on an island full of trans women. This was really funny because this is like his worst nightmare, because he's ending up on this surrounded by these trans women, and they've forced him to dress up as a woman. So that's pretty much all of Amazon Lily. It was a nice little break, like a comedic break from all of the seriousness of Sabaody and everything that was happening before that. I did enjoy going along for the ride on everything that was the Amazon Lily arc, but then we head off to Impel Down, which becomes a bit more, not fully serious, but yeah, a little bit more serious. When they reach Impel Down, they manage to get inside and they're greeted by the Vice Warden, Hannibal, and he's dressed up in like all of this pharaoh gear from, the Egyptian times. It's such an interesting costume design. It's pretty cool. Before we get like right into the depths of Impel Down, there is this really, really important scene towards the beginning where Garp goes and visits Ace, because obviously Ace is Garp's grandson and Ace is about to get executed, so he wants to go visit him and chat to him. And this is the scene where we find out that Ace's dad is not actually Monkey D. Dragon. It is in fact Gold D. Roger, which is crazy. This was like such a revelation that I did not see coming at all. Turns out that Ace and Luffy aren't actually biological brothers at all. This is like pretty massive news to happen. I honestly did not see this coming because I always thought that Ace and Luffy looked alike. I don't know, what do you guys think? Because throughout all of Alabasta, when Ace was with Luffy, I was like, there's so many similarities between them. They're definitely brothers. So yeah, this one was a bit of a shock to me and I really couldn't believe that they weren't actually brothers. It is like pretty wild to think that Ace is the son of like the great pirate king this whole time. It really shows like the fact that he is a natural born leader. You know, why he is so strong and why he is the way he is because of his dad. But Ace refuses to kind of accept him as his dad. Boa manages to get into the prison and she has to kind of do like a strip search just to make sure that she's not harboring any weapons. She manages to get through by using her powers, like turning her into stone and then turning her back so that she never remembers anything. And that's when Luffy gets out from under her garments. And there is this like absolutely hilarious moment where she's walking with the guards on her way to see Ace, because that was like her condition for coming to Impel Down, is that she could go see Ace. And then she's walking, I think it's with the other guards and Hannibal. And as she's going into the elevator, she turns back and she sees Luffy on top of the roof, you know, hiding so that no one can see him. He mouths the words, "Thank you" to her, but she sees that as "I love you," and then she faints. I guess it's like an overwhelm of emotions that Luffy has just said "I love you" to her. Now Luffy is on the first floor, so he's managed to make his way into the jail and he's running around trying to figure out how to keep descending down to the different floors. That's when he bumps into Buggy, who's like a very surprising entrance. We saw a little bit of Buggy in the earlier days. He is introduced during East Blue. It's a hilarious interaction between the two. Buggy this whole time has just been wanting to defeat Luffy because he's like mad at Luffy for defeating him. But yeah, they're both just trying to run away from these guards and get away, both of them. So then they end up just working together to get away. Luffy asked Buggy if he could help him get to the 4th floor, I think it was, help him find the stairs to the 4th floor. And that's when they kind of make a bit of a trade where if Luffy will give him the bracelet that's on his arm, it holds the map that he wants to, you know, to find treasure. So he was like, yep, I'll take you to the 4th floor if you give me that bracelet. Then they get down to level 3 where there's another surprise entrance of Mr. 3 from that like Alabasta arc. He was part of the Baroque works. I think the last time we saw him, he was getting eaten by a crocodile. Obviously they captured him and he was stuck in jail. So they managed to get him out and now all 3 of them are running, trying to get down to the different levels. It's actually hilarious because both Mr. 3 and Buggy, they just want to escape the prison. They just want to get out of there. That's like their main goal the whole time. But they keep getting dragged further and further down into the prison. And Luffy the whole time thinks that they're there to help him. But in fact, they just coincidentally keep getting brought along for the ride. That I found really funny. Meanwhile, this is all happening. There's also a few scenes that we see Ace in his cell. That's where we also get introduced to Jinbei. I absolutely love Jinbei. But at this time, he's introduced as like a warlord because we don't really know much about him. But we see them talking. Boa ends up making her way to Ace's cell, and that's when she gets to tell him that Luffy has broken into the prison and is here to save him. And the absolute shock and horror and like concern on Ace's face as like the big brother and he's in this prison, it was actually really heartbreaking at that time. They had like, at this point, you don't really get to see much of their relationship, but you can just tell how much love that they have for each other and how much Ace as a big brother just wants to protect Luffy. And so the fact that he's now in this dangerous prison and can get harmed, I think Ace at that point was like very, very upset at the thought that Luffy is in the prison. Luffy, Buggy and Mr. 3, they're all fighting against these jailer beasts who are kind of like guards in a way. They just kind of keep the jails the prisoners in check. They end up falling down through to level 3, much to Buggy and Mr. 3's dismay, because they just want to go up, not down. But they end up making their way to level 3, and this is like an absolute inferno. Burning hot level where all of the prisoners are like subjected to really harsh heat conditions. This prison, it's really interesting seeing all the levels that they go into. It really captures like an old school prison where it just seems like absolute hell to have to be in there as a prisoner. The torture that they're subjected to, it's all absolutely terrifying. The fact that they have to go through all these torturous conditions, and the worst criminals are in the worst conditions, like down to each level. It's kind of like, it really does remind me of an old school jail back in like the olden days, because it just is hell. This is a level where they end up bumping into another familiar face, Bon Clay, who was Mr. 2 from Alabaster as well. So he was a part of the Baroque works that was under Crocodile. That was really interesting to see another familiar face pop up. This is also another, I guess, cute little reunion between Luffy and Bon. After they end up defeating this jailer beast, there's this other hilarious moment where Buggy and Mr. 3 are arguing because they're both like, we just need to get out of here. How are we going to get out of here? We keep ending up back with Luffy and further down into this prison. The floor underneath them just collapses. So then now they're descending all the way down to level 4. I feel like there was just so much happening in this arc. Like there was this main story with Luffy that was happening. Obviously, this main story is that Luffy needs to get to Ace so that he can rescue him. But apart from that, there are like these little billions of arcs happening around Luffy that it sometimes can get quite overwhelming. Like when I think back to it, I just think of chaos. Each character has their own goals and each character is doing something different. On level 4 is where we kind of get properly introduced to Magellan. He's introduced quite a bit throughout, but now we get to see just how strong he is. He's like this minotaur, is big, like this minotaur, and he is basically made out of poison. He is just a very menacing, and I guess he's the villain of this arc, right? I feel like he would be the only villain that I can think of in Impel Down. The funny thing about Magellan though is that he has IBS, so the guards around him have to carry around this big like porta potty where they just hold it on their shoulders. So every time Magellan gets the runs, he has to hop into this porta potty and just let loose because his IBS plays up. I enjoyed this kind of personality trait, as what you can call it, of his. And it was like kind of like a little bit of a weakness as well. Well, it's very much a weakness of his because he has to keep going to the toilet. I think the poison gives him the runs as well, like because he's made out of poison, it's just like affects his stomach, I think. But yeah, TMI, so let's move on. Back to Luffy and what he's up to. So Magellan realizes that Luffy is basically wiped out clean from his poison. He thinks it's absolutely just useless even worrying about him because he's just going to die anyway. Level 5 is also another interesting kind of hellscape of a level because it is just freezing cold, like subarctic temperatures. The inmates are just freezing to death. It is a very torturous jail, and if that existed in real life, it would literally be the epitome of hell, I reckon. So all hope is kind of lost for Luffy. He's just like completely wiped out and he's in a jail cell. But then comes along Bon Clay to save the day, and he ends up getting Luffy out of this jail cell, marching his way. His whole goal of this is obviously he wants to help Luffy, but he's also trying to find Eva, who is the queen of the Kambaka Island, which is where Sanji currently is. Bon is carrying Luffy like on his back. He's fully determined to help Luffy because like Luffy is non-responsive and he's in this harsh terrain. He's fighting off all of these wolves. He's at his wit's end basically. He's not gonna make it any further. And so Bon ends up passing out. The wolves are about to get them all, and then Luffy ends up biting one of the wolves, and then he uses his haki to basically wipe out all the wolves. And then someone comes along and ends up saving them. Bon ends up waking up in this completely different place. He's all bandaged up and kind of nursed back to health. And then he gets to this massive bar which has a stage in front of it. Out comes Eva. So we get to meet Eva, who was the queen of Kumbaka Island. I absolutely love Eva. He is just hilarious. I love his death wink as well, where that he just like winks and then everyone just gets blown away. Because he really grows on you as a character throughout Impel Down, and then when you get to Marineford, he's just becomes a staple in One Piece, I feel. For me, he did. Tell me in the comments if you also have love for Eva, because he deserves it. Bon finally gets to meet Eva, who he's been searching for this whole time, and that's when he asks Eva if she can save Luffy. But the way that he has to do it is lock Luffy up in a room, and she will, I think, inject with her talons. She'll inject some kind of hormone in him, and then it's up to Luffy to regain consciousness and to come alive. He's got to fight his way out of near death, basically. So he does this. Bon Clay is just beside himself, and he's waiting at Luffy's door this whole time. It's all barred up, but he's waiting at his door, shouting to Luffy, like, you can do it. You can get through this. Honestly, Bon is the best friend that anyone can have. He is an absolute gem. I did not like Bon at the start. I kind of found him to be annoying, but I swear Impel Down was his saving grace. For me, he's one of the best characters to come out of, I guess, before the New World. He's one of my favorite characters to come out before the New World. He has also had, in my opinion, one of the best character developments as well. He started off as just kind of like this nobody character in Baroque Works, and then he ended up in Impel Down as one of the main characters. He dragged Luffy through hell and raised him up and brought him back to life. He became the friend, the best friend of him and basically the whole Straw Hat crew in a way. So he had one of the best character developments. And honestly, if you think I'm wrong, you tell me why in the comments, because I don't think you can. But I challenge you to tell me I'm wrong in the comments. In the end, Luffy comes back to life, and Bon is obviously absolutely beside himself, and now everyone is in on trying to save Ace. So Eva is down to save Ace, and he is there to help Luffy along the way. That's when they end up making their way to level 6. I think security was down at this point. It wasn't as hectic as it was before, but they ended up making their way to level 6, and they were so close to seeing Ace. But the more that Luffy shouts out for Ace, no one is replying. They run up and they make their way to the jail that Ace used to be in, and found that he was no longer there. Just earlier, he was brought out of his jail cell to make his way to the execution site in Marineford. Luffy is obviously very disheartened by this, but this is where he gets to meet Jinbei. So he meets Jinbei, and Jinbei tells him everything that's happened and that Ace is going to be executed. He's out for execution now. We have to get out of here and we have to rescue Ace. They manage to break him out. And then we get another surprise entrance with Crocodile. All of these characters that were in Alabasta end up coming back in Impel Down. And it was a very big surprise to see Crocodile make another appearance. All of them are now together and they are fighting their way. They now have to get all the way back to the top of Impel Down to make their escape, and to find a way to get a ship so that they can sail off to rescue Ace. At this point, Magellan also finds out that Luffy is actually still alive and he's still making his way through the prison. He ends up making his way down to level 6 and they all have an altercation. Magellan, as I was saying, is so powerful. So on level 6, Eva tells everyone to get going so that she can kind of stall. She can fight Magellan and stall so that the rest of them can get out and get away. So everything is just absolutely descending into chaos at this point. There is just so much going on. It is so difficult for me to remember all the little details, but I remember that Blackbeard made an appearance at some point and he was in the jail trying to break out. Well, actually, we don't really know what is happening and why he's in this jail at this point, but he is breaking out some of these inmates that he wants to join his crew. Now, I absolutely despise Blackbeard as a character. I just don't like him. I think it's just because of how he is and just being too powerful, too just arrogant. So I just don't like him as a character. That can always change. I mean, I didn't like Kuma when he was first introduced, but since then, I realized that he is trying to help the Straw Hats. So there's something going on there where he actually does have a good heart. Maybe that'll happen in the future, but I don't think so. Blackbeard he just seems so evil to me. I do really like his voice actor though. It's a cool voice. This whole time that they're trying to get through each of these levels is so intense because obviously Magellan's on their back. They're trying to get up to each level. Buggy and Mr. 3 are also, etching up to level 1. And it's actually really funny with Buggy at this time because he makes this whole crew out of a lot of the inmates. The inmates start following him because they think that Buggy is breaking him out of this prison. But in fact, Buggy is basically just like fumbling his way through everything, and everything is kind of just falling into place so that it looks like he's helping them get out. It is a funny little side arc that happens there. They're all there on level 1 and, they realize that there are absolutely no marine ships in sight because Magellan had ordered them all to disperse because they obviously didn't want all these prisoners to get out. So then they realize that there's no ships around, but they would have just left. Crocodile, Buggy and Mr. 3 end up on the door, and Jinbei is guiding them to try and find one of the battleships so that they can take them down and then they could steal the ship. And it's another moment where Buggy is just along for the ride. He says, I will go with you guys and I will fight as well. So all of the inmates that were following him before are just like cheering him on and thinking that he is just an absolute hero. But when in fact he's just so like cowardly and scared this whole time. But he gets onto the door and then they end up getting a ship to bring back. Luffy and his group were kind of lagging behind a little bit because Luffy stayed to try and stall Magellan, like fight him a little bit to stall. So yeah, they ended up making it back, with Eva as well. And they made it to level 1 with Magellan right on them. Crocodile, Buggy and Mr. 3 did end up getting a ship and they managed to sail it, but it just didn't get close enough to the edge of Impel Down in order for everyone to jump on board. Jinbei was like, leave it up to me. Everyone just jump in the water and I'll take care of the rest. And he ended up calling some whale sharks to come in and get everyone to the ship on their backs. So with this, they made it out. They broke out of Impel Down, which is like a complete impossible task. I mean, it's an impossible task to break in, but to break out is even crazier. So you just see Magellan in the distance just kind of defeated because he couldn't save Impel Down and he couldn't keep everyone in there. So he's a bit defeated. I did kind of feel bad for him because he is a villain, but he's kind of just doing his job. I mean, there are some heinous criminals in this jail that if they escape, then it is bad news for the citizens of the world, basically. So he's just doing his job. He's just trying to keep order and keep these really horrible criminals from escaping. So I did feel bad for him in the end. Now everyone's escaped and they are on this marine ship. They're ready to go. It was like a very kind of relieving moment. They had to trek through all of the battleships so that they could get out of the gate. They got to the main gate and then they saw that the gate was pretty much closing. And so they didn't think that they were going to make it out. And then this is when we find out that Bon actually stayed behind and he impersonated Magellan and he ordered everyone to open the gates. Bon sacrificed himself so that everyone could get out. I was devastated. This was such a sad and such like an emotional moment. I couldn't bear it, to be honest. Like, Bon had grown on me so much throughout Impel Down, so much that this moment where he's actually sacrificed himself for the lives of others. No words. I'm sorry. No words. I'm thinking back to it and I just, it's so sad. Luffy finds out that Bon is still in Impel Down and he's like, everyone, we have to turn around. We have to go save Bon. We are not leaving him behind under any condition. And understandable. I mean, Bon has literally saved Luffy's life and brought him through Impel Down so that he could escape and get to Ace. But No, they couldn't. Bon made that sacrifice and they had to keep trekking through and getting through that gate for Bon. They had a final moment on one of the snail corresponders and they just like said their final goodbyes and Luffy was like, thank you so much. I cried again because I cry a lot in One Piece, but yeah, that was so sad. If he did make that sacrifice and then he doesn't come back, that is such a legacy of Bon. That for me is going to carry on throughout One Piece. I am always going to remember Bon. With the sacrifice of Bon, they make it out. They get out of Impel Down and make it out of the main gate to go and rescue Ace. Impel Down was super tense. I felt like super tense and on edge throughout all of Impel Down. And it was also very chaotic. In my brain, the way I'm trying to connect all the dots, it just feels like absolute chaos. And maybe that's kind of the way that it's supposed to be portrayed. It's a full chaotic go. They're trying to, they have a limited amount of time to save Ace. And it felt that way. It felt like I was on a clock and I was, the time was ticking and they had to get out of there. I also feel like maybe since Sabaody, Luffy hasn't been able to defeat the villains and the enemies and the people who he's wanted to as easily as he used to. He kind of keeps getting knocked back and back and back to a point where he's not actually as strong as maybe he thought he was initially. That doesn't stop him from thinking that he is or from being determined to get stronger. But it kind of showed a lot of his vulnerability in Impel Down. And, I guess since the end of Sabaody, it has shown a lot of his weaknesses. Another aspect that I took out of Impel Down is how much the people around Luffy are willing to help Luffy and to kind of stand by his side throughout all of this messiness and throughout all of these battles to see, it wasn't really to see Luffy gain strength or to gain prosperity. It was to help him save Ace in the end. Jinbei wanted to save Ace. I think Eva also wanted to save Ace, but Eva also has the, ulterior motive because of Dragon. But they all kind of surround Luffy and want to lift Luffy up and to help Luffy. They all end up wanting to help Luffy, and that really shone through with Impel Down. I always love reading through all of your thoughts and opinions on the sagas and the arcs that I'm going through. So please make sure to add a comment down below, going through your favorite scenes or your overall opinions of Amazon Lily and Impel Down. Also, if you disagree with anything that I'm saying, as usual, please make sure to like the video if you did enjoy it and to subscribe if you haven't already. Otherwise, I hope you have an amazing day or night, whatever it is over there, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.